Alright guys, Jason here, back with part 2 of our whip tying. I now have the whip in the vise. I've got my 4 colors set up to start. The lengths right now that we're using are going to be 12 foot, 12 foot, 10 foot, and 8 foot. So the two 12s are at the end, your 10 foot, then your 8 foot. So this is to braid your first belly. You only need 4. On the next one we're going to use 6. So right now, as you can tell, I've got them actually attached to the handle. So what I did was just a little bit of super glue under each piece of paracord here to attach them nice and solid to the handle. Wait for them to dry, and now we're going to start our plating. So we're going to use standard plating over 2, under 2. And what I mean by that is we're going to start with our very back cord, go under 2, and then over the top 2. Then we're going to start with the other side and do the same thing. Under 2 and over 2. After I do a couple, I will show you what it's going to look like on the top pattern. Just make sure you go nice and slow, pull it really tight. The tighter you do your plating, the better your whips will turn out. If your plating is loose, when you go to use your whips, you're going to find out right away. It's not a race, just take your time. Under 2, over 2, and you'll see the pattern start to emerge here. After I get a couple wraps, I will show you guys the top of the whip to show you what the pattern will start to look like. Now that I've done a couple wraps, you'll notice this is the top of our whip here. The pattern's already starting to line up. Big thing is just go slow, keep it really tight, make sure your pattern stays the same all the way through. Be consistent with your wrapping. Take a break. One thing I will recommend that you have is a pair of forceps, locking forceps, or I actually use a small pair of vice grips because when you want to take a break, you're going to want to lock this down. And vice grips are great for just pinching it. You can walk away, do a few things, come back. Your hands are going to get sore, especially if you don't tie a lot of paracord. I unfortunately tie an awful lot, so I can go quite a while with plating before I have to take a break. The other thing you're really going to want that's crucial is to have a vise when you're doing your whips. It's almost impossible to make one of these without a vise. One thing I will say, guys, is I bought this little tiny vise at I think it was Home Depot for $24.95. It is not a great vise. It will get done for this, but quite frankly, quite often, as you'll just notice, my work slips a little bit because the vise doesn't lock as tight as it should. I've got it cranked over as tight as it possibly will go, and it still slips every now and then. So definitely, when you buy your vise, it is better to spend a little extra money and get a better one. The $24 one, like I said, it will work for this, but I would probably go the next step up. $50 to $60 vise, be a lot better, and it'll last you for years to come. Also, when you're doing it, make sure you keep your line for your crossing over of your paracord nice and straight down the spine. That will really help with your whip as well. It'll keep everything nice and equal. It'll just give your finish whip a lot nicer finish. The core, which is this first belly that I'm doing here, really the colors don't matter, guys, because this one is going to get covered by the next layer. But I always like to experiment with the cores, try a couple of new colors that I've never tried before. That way I know what color I might like to do my whip. You'll notice I can move it freely up and down in my vise, and I prefer not to be able to move this thing, so not a great vise. Alright, we're back, guys. Me and the crow sitting here tying whips. I'm gonna overdub music anyway on most of this, so.
What got you into tying whips anyways?
I don't know.
Just
Thought it was cool. Yeah, thought it was cool. I was like, fuck, I could make one of those.
I just thought there was some sort of inspiration.
No! No, I seen one made, I'm like, fuck, that's paracord, I could do that. And they're so cool, like,
Well, yeah.
I always liked whips when I was a kid and stuff too, so. The other thing I'm going to say, guys, is when you're making your whip, what you'll find is as you start to get further and further down your whip, the more movement it has, the harder it is to tie and keep it tight. Again, this is where your vice grips come in real handy. You can measure it to the size of the whip, lock your cord in tight, and then adjust it accordingly inside your vise. So I'm about to drop mine back a few inches here. Biggest thing with these guys is to have lots of patience. Keep your ties nice and tight. Make sure you keep your rope snug at all times. And when you get tired of doing it, it's best just to grab your vice grips, lock it off, and come back to it later. Because if not, you're going to find you rush and hurry, and then you're really not going to like the outcome of your whip, and you're going to end up having to either rewrap the whole thing, do another one. It's not worth it. Best thing to do is take a break, put it away for a little bit, go do something else for 20 minutes, half an hour, and come back and tie some more. It's very easy to get overwhelmed as these take hours to complete. Alright guys, we're almost coming down to the end of our first short paracord, so the end of our 8-foot strand. And once we get there, I'll show you guys how to take it out, drop it, as we say. Really easy to do on your underlayer or your first belly. A little bit more challenging when you're doing it on your final layer because you want to hide the evidence of you taking it out of there. So I'll show you how to do that later as well. Right now, for these ones, it's going to be much easier to drop it off because this layer is going to be covered by sinew and another belly anyway. Which is a shame. It's always nice when you see this nice pattern emerge and then you just cover it again. Person probably could tie one of these a day, maybe even 2 whips a day, but your hands would not like you afterwards. Do enough of this and you'll start to feel like you have carpal tunnel. You actually could get it. As it starts to get a little bit smaller, guys, as far as diameter goes, it does get to be a little harder on the hands, a little harder to tie and hold tight, all of those things. Just use your patience, keep it nice and tight. Just the way we like it, eh, fellas? Guys, I usually keep going on my strands until they are too short to pull tight any longer. At that point, that's when you know it's time to drop your strand. So the one I've got left in my right hand has only got maybe another wrap or 2 left, and it'll be time to drop it because it is getting too small to pull tight. talking about guys getting too short. I probably get another couple wraps out of it before I have to drop it. Once it gets too short to hold on to, it's just not worth it. Same here, this one's getting too short. Now, when I drop them, if I drop them both at the same time, I can continue my pattern. If I drop one and then the other, then it will actually break up the pattern a bit. So, all depends on how you want to do it. I will probably drop these both at the same time, depending on where they end up. Again, not as important on your first belly because you're going to completely hide them anyway. No one will ever see them. But even though no one ever sees them, guys, you'll notice I am a perfectionist when it comes to doing this. Even though you're not going to see it. If I make any mistakes, I will always go back and correct them. I do not just cover them up. Any other good whip maker or anyone who does any work, to be honest, should do the same. But it's never good to cut corners. You'll always pay for it sooner or later. Alright guys, this one's, I could probably do one more. I'm not going to bother. I've got lots of room here, so I'm just going to drop this one off now. And the other side will probably get one more wrap and it will get dropped as well. That way we drop them off at the same time and keep our pattern. This guy gets his second wrap. And that's it. You can forget about them. Just leave them hanging as if they weren't even there. So basically, instead of coming up to grab this one next, I'm going to move down and grab the other one and continue with my pattern. Now you'll notice it's only 4 strings, not 6. So your tying is going to be a little different. Again, instead of taking him, I'm going to skip him. And now you'll notice there's only 2, instead of 3 pink, there'll be only 2 between each time we put the new pattern in. So we've dropped 1 pink layer out of the pattern by dropping both of those at the same time. And this is where your pattern starts to break up. Still will look nice. You're just going to notice that your pattern starts to break right here at this point. Again, we're going to skip that little one and go to the next one. We're just going to leave them hanging off our whip like that for now. As we're coming up to this tight transition here, guys, you'll notice this is where you again want to keep your cord super tight and make sure that you have it covered properly. All you have to do for that, guys, is just make sure you snug every cord as you go. Take your time, go slow, don't forget any. Make sure there's no